Pitch up yours down there, Matt. Yeah.
Okay, good evening, folks. We'll make a start. Thank you very much for attending. This is the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 23rd of May. We'll start with agenda item 2323. Are there any declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interests, please? None. If anything crops up during the meeting, please shout and we'll make a note of it in the minutes. 2423. Do we have any apologies for absence, Karen?
No, we do not, Chair.
No. A couple of committee members missing, so they may turn up. Ron's on Finance and Personnel, isn't he? So he may be delayed at work or something. Yeah, cool. So we've got two sets of minutes because we're two committees merged into one. We'll start with the first, which is the Finance Committee. You win a prize if you were here for it. Not many left. So we might have to rely on you, Mac, to say if they're accurate or not. Oh, and Chris, just having a look. Who was that? Well, no, just rely on Mac. Are you content that they're a true record?
They are.
They are. Brilliant. Thank you. So we will approve those. Just having a quick whiz through. Lovely. Thank you. Approved. And the Personnel Committee minutes. Mike and Chris were there. Are you happy that they're a true record?
I'd like to present these as an allegedly true record.
Thank you. There was one thing, Alan, I noted in them, which spoke about the staff welfare review. And there was a report that went to the Personnel Committee when they last met, which I think was February from memory. And I just wondered if we could maybe circulate that to the committee because we're all quite new. And if there's been a recent questionnaire done, I think that'd be useful information to get an idea of where we're at. And the only other thing was the recommendation about full council meetings and live streaming. And I just wanted to check. So all of our council meetings now, full council and all the committees are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, just not live streamed. Is that correct? Cool. I just wanted to make sure that was the case. Brilliant. Everyone happy with minutes? Yep. Moving on to approval of payments. 2723, you would have had attached to your email, which you'll see every month, a list of payments made since the last committee meeting. It's required in our financial regs that they're presented to Finance Committee, or in this case, personnel. Does anyone have any questions on any of those documents and lists of payments?
That's a technical question.
Yep.
Who's going to be the second nominee for Unity Bank now? If James not here.
It's one of those things that we have to have a discussion on. It's a data connect mandate.
Ah, good question.
We do have two, just for the chairman's on as a secretary. I think you've probably forgotten your passwords because it's been quite a while since you've done it, and you'll be on. So at the moment, there are two.
Yep. Okay, are we happy to approve the payments? Do you need a proposer and a seconder for that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Chris is proposing and a seconder?
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. You'll get into the swing of the payment situation. It appears every month, so fairly standard stuff. Next one, 2823. This is the financial report for the most recent financial year ending 31st of March. Thank you for all your work, Alan, pulling that together, because I know it's a big job at the end of the financial year. Do you want to introduce that one? Just sort of give us, I know you've done a really helpful summary note on the front. If you could just talk us through that quickly, that'd be great.
What I'll do is I'll just talk to the summary. So what we've done is when we did a budget forecast in about January of this year, we were forecasting a loss of about £34,000 before year-end entries. And what's actually been our saviour, one is the grants that we've received, because we've received money from the Fish Pass, we've received other grants which have boosted our income. And our portfolio of shares has actually also performed very well. We've actually made a trading profit where Barrett and Cook, who trade in the shares, have made a profit of about £25,000. So our income is up quite significantly. If you look at the budget, actual is 1.3 million and the budget was 1.1 million. So you'll see that there's a variance of £205,521 on the income side. On the expenditure side, we've had, normally personnel has significant savings because we have it, we've never been able to fill our staff establishment. But over time, that's been eroded, and you'll see that personnel have just come out with a small surplus of £1,039. The other committees, there's been quite significant savings, cemetery, amenities, allotments, and heritage and town events. And then the venues and communication committee have exceeded their expenditure. Part of the reason of that is that they've actually been far more successful in terms of activities than we budgeted. So if you sell more goods, you're going to have more costs in terms of the cost of goods that you're selling. So that has resulted in that budget having an adverse variance. We've also had significant compliance costs in the Carnegie complex, and those have all been rectified. So our repairs and maintenance expenditure there significantly overspent. We'll see that other expenditure is quite high, and what we've done is where we've had the grant expenditure and the income coming in, we've had to put the grant expenditure against that. Otherwise, it looks as if we're making money out of grants, which we're not. So we received £58,000 from the Environmental Agency for the fish pass. We've actually spent £58,000 on that, and that's just been brought in here just so that there is a matching of expenditure to income. So overall, we've come up with a surplus of £4,803 compared to what we were predicting is probably on track because of the surpluses and the grants. If we'd taken those out, we would actually have had a loss this year. So we've been able to balance that all out. In terms of what I've done in these schedules, you'll see in the schedules that are distributed, there's all the various income accounts that we have. We don't duplicate income in all the cost centres. So, for example, only the revenue relating to personnel is recorded in personnel. Only revenue relating to venues and communication is recorded there, and income and amenities. We don't take income and split it between the various committees, and that's very important to understand on the expenditure side, which you'll also see that we only have one salary line, one salary budget, because we don't sit there and allocate out all the costs. We have one line item for insurance. And that was a decision that was taken just before I joined the council. I suppose at some stage we might have to review that decision to see whether it still works, whether it's still providing the right information. From my personal perspective, I have to say it makes life a lot easier because we only have to process a transaction once, whereas previously I think they had probably took the same transaction and split it into 6 or 7 different codes. And there's just reasons. These have all gone through the committees over the period of time. The other committee has met in April, so they haven't had a look at this. But this really just gives you the breakdown of the expenditure. And just to confirm what I was saying earlier on, if you look at the bottom of this schedule, you'll see all those items there where there's no budget. Those are all our projects funded expenditure where we've had grant money coming in. We didn't budget for them because we didn't know that we were going to do a fish pass, for example, and the expenditure that's gone out of that.
Could that, where you've just been explaining that brilliantly, and I followed some of it on your screen, can you summarise that in a paragraph to let us know, or would you be good enough to show me how it works? My brain doesn't work that I have to leave it on figures like that. I understand what you're saying, and it's detailed in the lines on the right.
Yes.
But I'd like to be a bit more clear on it. Okay.
So let me give you an example. If I look at some of the projects that we have here, we have the Guildhall HLF type expenditure, which is the Heritage Lottery Fund that funded the redevelopment of the Guildhall. We've received grant during the year for that, and we've incurred expenditure during the year for that. So the income sits in the grant income, and the expenditure will sit there. We've also received we're eligible to receive 200,000 rand from the Heritage Lottery Fund for the master plan. We've had consultants doing that, and everything that we've incurred on that particular project is funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, excluding £1,000 contribution from GW Stanleyforth and a £10,000 contribution from the Thetford Council.
Yeah.
So again, that's sitting in other expenditure, and these particular schedules, those numbers.
So you've got to show it on that somewhere.
I've got to show it on there because it actually is expenditure.
Yeah.
We deem it as a project. So during the year, we will account for it as a project because it's not recurring, it's not routine. Got it. But for year end, we have to bring all these in. So I open up all these accounts at the year end just to show them there.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you.
No, that's fine. I think that's a good point. What we also receive reasonably often, I can't remember the frequency, is updates on how the budget's going, which is where you can see sort of variations a lot clearer. The year end, you get everything all at once, and those big amounts distort the figures somewhat. Whereas what I suspect we'll probably be more interested in is,
It's
issues over time.
familiar myself with it. Great. Just seeing those big numbers and like, hang on, that's way out for some reason. But thank you. That's great.
Well, it took me about a year to understand how they've done it, because they hadn't done it consistently. So sometimes they put projects, excluded them from these sheets, and sometimes they put them in.
Yeah.
So, but I try to simplify the accounting by making sure that it's easier to understand.
Where you mentioned things like them, so we've got a higher expenditure because we've got more functions on. Surely that equals itself out with our profit from those functions.
I think
We're buying more stock, if you like, and then surely what we make on it should. I couldn't see where that comes back.
So, for example, on the video communication, you'll see that we budgeted income of £106,000, 750. Our actual income was 133,004, so they had a surplus of 26,254, and then our costs have gone up by 44. So part of that variance is the increase in purchases. The other one was repairs and maintenance that we had a lot of one-off costs in terms of fire alarms, fire safety. We had other one-off, the boilers needed to be replaced, and we had all those challenges around the boilers, the heating, and everything else. And those costs are also sitting there, so they wouldn't have an impact on income. We just have to incur them to keep the building usable.
Yeah, got it. And so the one thing I failed to understand last time on finance is our reserve. Because we had so much talk about we're going to use a reserve. In my small-minded thinking, I would assume that reserve is there for those unexpected budgetary things that come along. So we haven't budgeted for fire alarms, for instance. They all go wrong and we have to replace them. Is that what the budget of the reserve is for, or not?
We have thirdly a general reserve, which the recommendation is that should be 25% of your income, and that should sustain your one-off unexpected costs.
Okay.
Our general reserve is sitting at about 250,000, so it's probably, it's probably slightly less than it should be, but we've also gone through tough times. The other reserves are all specific purpose reserves. So we do have the property renewal reserve that we've been trying to build up because our buildings are old and these things tend to happen. But unfortunately, the expenditure meets the criteria of expenditure. So if a heater boiler breaks down, we have to replace that. It's not an asset because we're not making the building better. We're just returning it to its condition. So where we have asset type expenditure, routine maintenance, unfortunately it comes into the expenditure. And, like I say, we either have to close down the buildings or whether it was a vehicle, same thing would happen. If a vehicle breaks down and you haven't budgeted for it, you have to make a decision. Do you take your vehicle off the road or do you fix it and try and find that money elsewhere? And there's been an element of that in the kind of management decisions. But the reserves are specific purpose. We have a property reserve, we have a market improvement, we have an allotment reserve. So if we do projects that meet the criteria of an asset, we could then use those reserves to fund that.
So that makes sense. We haven't got a huge pool of money that we can just dip into whenever we think.
No.
Thank you.
On that, sorry, I've left them.
No, honestly.
Go to the building, things like that. Like, if anything goes wrong in this place, we rent this venue. Who would be responsible for fixing the electricals or anything in this building if you went wrong, or if it needed upgrading?
This building belongs to the trust. So all we do as the Thetford Town Council is we actually rent this facility off the trust. The trust has its own income and expenditure, so the trust would meet those particular costs.
Right.
And hopefully it would meet it from the income it generates from the other tenants in the building, its investments, and some of the other income flows that it has.
Okay. There's only one loo up here.
Yes.
And like for all of us, it would be nice to have more. But if we wanted that doing, could we get that done in another loo up here? Would that not? It didn't work like that.
Well, the unfortunate part is the toilets in this building are just crazy. That the men's toilets are working downstairs apparently. So we keep that blocked. We have got a part of. We've had a lot of work done in terms of checking out the drainage, And we have identified that as as one of the projects that we have to do in this building to make it more sustainable. But that's GW Stanleyford. So when we have a GW Stanleyford meeting, one of the issues that will get raised will be around the cost of, the cost of maintenance of this particular facility. But the Carnegie also has its challenges, being relative, the Guildhall's relatively old building. So we do have challenges around maintaining that building.
Another question for later.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll have a lot of this in the first few months because it is complicated.
It's so completely.
So, yeah, and
I don't understand why we're here.
Yeah.
As opposed to in the Carnegie,
yeah,
for example. Yeah. It's,
well, there'll be those sort of debates.
Yeah.
When I first joined the council, only the mayor could use that toilet. You had to go downstairs. I'm not sure how long that stayed in place, but yeah, cool. Yeah, Terry.
I've got a question. I'm looking at the figures for the amenities committee. Is it fair to say the amenities overspent last year? Because I've read chatter online that said that was the case, but it looks more like an income issue. Could you clarify for me, please?
There were two things. One is that we had funded, we set aside money to fund the play parks from the play park reserve. That was a decision taken by full council in 2021, 2022. And I don't do those accounting entries until the year end. But I think we've always, when we've reported on the amenities committee, we've always said that. The second thing is that we had a challenge around the Rural Payments Authority. What happened is that the payments were slightly late. So some money relating to the previous year, we only received in April. But because it's just a grant received, we couldn't go back and accrue it. And the second thing that we did, and that was probably my mistake, is we got audited by the Rural Payments Authority for a grant they'd given to us in 2017. What had happened, the payment had been made outside the grant period, and the claim had been made to include it in the grant period. So we got, unfortunately, it was expenditure of £8,000. So they sent us an invoice demanding payment immediately, which I then paid them, and they then deducted it off the net £3,000 that we have. So they've actually given that back to us. And I've gone back because I have that information and corrected that in the accounting record. So the amenities committee has not made its income is down by 34,000, and it's made expenditure of 8,600. But like I said, the income side was really we were just so uncertain as to what those rural payments authorities were. But the expenditure side has certainly been in terms of, it performed better than budget.
Thank you.
We're a bit disadvantaged with amenities because it's mainly open space management and there's very little opportunity to get income from that space. We get a little bit from sort of events and activities, but the lion's share of the money comes from the RPA to manage it in a sustainable way for conservation. And, a 10% change either way or whatever actually affects our budget quite a lot. So we rely on that money from them to look after the commons and various spaces. But we're hoping that will continue.
Sorry. Am I right to say, Alan, that the total income, something for the year, was something in the region of £1,350,000, and the grant income was about 150,000, which is, I suppose, 12%. Is that right? So, can you recall, or could we find out easily, is that better or worse than usual in the year to have something around about that sort of 12%? The total coming from.
This is the best it's been since I've been involved.
Okay.
I've been here since 2009, August 2019. Last year we hardly received any money. The year before we hardly received any money. So this has been fantastic because we've received the Heritage HLF Master Plan. We've received more money from the HLF Guildhall project. We've received money from the Fish Pass. So the amount of grants received have increased significantly.
The fish pass, I mean, when you become a council, you don't necessarily think you're going to spend your days talking about fish passes. But in a sense, that was imposed on us, wasn't it? It wasn't our decision to put in a fish pass. We could have filled up the gap in the bank, so to speak.
Provided we didn't hard engineer it. And that was the challenge that we had. So we had, I mean, there's so many emails, and I think you get to the stage where you could select which email you want to support your story. But we got an email from the EA to say, first of all, we had to sort it out by July this year. The FRAP permit was going to expire, so we had to do something. And all they didn't want was a hard engineered solution. And so we were told, not directly, but we were told that if there was a hard solution, you couldn't put Gambians in or anything else like that in, that the EA would have walked away from it. And then we had to sort of resolve the problem ourselves. So we would have had to fund all that money from our own reserves rather than having money which we did get from the EA to the tune of £50,000.
So a lot of the money that comes in a form of grant is not really us obtaining grants in a general vague sort of way, because presumably councils find it very difficult. People granting bodies want to give money to charities. But is there any way we can do better to get a higher proportion of the money coming from grants?
I think one of the things that the town clerk has focused on this year is to actually maximise the amount of grants that we get. So her focus has been on grant mobilisation, and I think you can see the results. You know, the money's come in, and just to support bid funding, because as much no one's going to give us money for our discretion, unfortunately. You know, all of the money that we're going to receive is going to be for a specific project. So if we can get someone to help us on some of the work that we want to do as a council, that's really the bonus prize for us.
Okay. Any other questions, folks? Nope. Well, I think it's good news. Any year-end accounts that show a surplus, I'm happy with. Even if it's just short of 5k, that's good news, particularly given where we're at with inflation and all the other challenges we've faced over the last few years. So our task on this one is to note the financial report. Content to note? Yep. Thank you very much. We might have covered a bit of this in that last discussion, because the next item is to receive and review the schedule of reserves, which was a separate attachment. Anything to add, Alan, to the schedule of that?
I've taken all the reserves that we have, and we, as a council, a few years ago, we used to have 48 reserves. We rationalised them down to about 24, which we have now, excluding the restricted use reserves. And possibly one of the tasks of this committee later on will be to go back and relook at the reserves and recommend to the council what the reserves should be and how they should be used. So basically, these are the reserves we have. You can see our general reserve is there. We've got toilet renewal reserves when we need to revamp the toilets and whenever that comes, and bay park reserves and all sorts of reserves. We've got restricted use reserves at the bottom here. What I've done for ease of accounting and also to make the financial statements a little bit more understandable is I put all the restricted use reserves, I've actually brought them into reserves, and then I put the expenditure against them as either an asset or a project. So you can see out of our reserves, we've spent about £177,000 on assets, most of it around our buildings. We've enhanced the roof of the Carnegie, for example. What else have we done? We've done some work on the marketplace. We've bought new computers, and yeah, that's probably most of that. And then we've also used our projects to fund reserves, and that's the last column on the right here, spent on reserves. 34,000 is what we've used to actually to pay for the backlog maintenance on our play park equipment. If you recall, council went out to tender. We had a tender for 80,000. We split it over 2 years. So we spent £40,000 of that this year, in the past financial year. We've budgeted to spend another 40,000 this year, and we had 15,000 brought forward from 2021 of about 15,000. I've just rounded up to 15,000. It was 14,000, some figure like that. The other money that we spent on projects is our election costs. We had an election last year. What we do there on the election costs is that they get incurred every 5 years. So we always ensure that we've got sufficient money in that reserve to pay for elections, because they happen every 4 years, sorry, not every 5 years. And then the market improvement reserves, we receive some money, we set it aside, and we've used that on the market. So the planters that you see in the marketplace and some of the other things have been used for that. So that's really our summary of reserves. Opening balance of 1.2 million. We've received £94,000. We've contributed from our income. We've received another £1,500, which was committed expenditure, but I couldn't accrue it at the end of last year because the obligation was only met this year. We've had £41,000 of grants, and we've spent £177,000 on assets and just under £62,000 on projects. And that leaves a closing balance of 1.143235.
Okay. What's a restricted use reserve? Is that the project targeted and you can't use it for anything other than that?
So to give you an example on...
I'm looking at Swain Close and none.
Well, the history is that we sold some land,
Yeah.
and we made a commitment that we'd use that money for restricted use. In fact, we actually undertook to use it for play parks. So it sits there until we actually use it for play parks.
Okay. And what's the nunnery one then?
The nunnery one is a little bit before my time. I've just been told it's a restricted use.
Stuart knows the answer to that one.
Basically, it came back from a ransom strip of land on the entrance to the Nunnery Fields estate that when the developer put that in, they came across our land and it was negotiated so that we've given that money, and it was the council at the time earmarked it to be used for capital projects. We have used a little of it in the past for St Peter's, and that's how it arose.
So that's there. The people of the nunnery area can sort of see that there's 100 and whatever £1,000 sitting there, and that money can be used to benefit that community.
Well, we as a council can choose to how we use it, but it arose, as I say, as a result of that ransom strip.
Yeah.
But it wasn't earmarked specifically for use in that land. It's
How
just
long has it been sitting there then?
20 years, 25 years.
So we could use it.
Yeah, so I said some of it has been used in the past,
Yeah.
for capital works, so to speak, but rather than it being used on a day-to-day basis
Yeah.
and subsidising our
Projects.
own costs, it's very much earmarked if we wanted to do a decent project. So one of the things we were trying to do with St Peter's, which was quite a high capital cost, was to use some of that money to be match funding to draw down further money.
Okay, we do need to have a proportion of funds as reserves in general in case of real issues during the course of a year.
Absolutely.
So, you wouldn't want to spend all your reserves.
No. But if there's £120,000 sitting there, and it's been sitting there for a long time, it would be nice to find a project to benefit the community to actually use it.
Well, the Heritage Master Plan for May is something that we're working on.
Brilliant.
And there will be
Things in
subject to that being submitted in November. If we are successful, then there will be some large projects coming forward, including St Peter's, which will require some contribution from ourselves to match the large amounts that we get from that.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Seeing it actually used would be good.
But as I said, what we'll do this year is we will bring forward, probably around about September, I'll bring forward a document to this particular committee, and we'll look at all the reserves, just check that we've got the right intellectual history of them, and then provenance, yeah, and then we can make sure that how we spend them, is in accordance. But the point that I do want to make is, if I went back a couple of years, because I had to understand how this worked, and what we had been doing is we've been funding quite a significant, probably a few £100,000 of projects from our precept, and over time, because we've eroded our precept just through COVID and everything else, we're not funding any projects from our precept. So this is our project's pot of money, if you want.
Yeah.
So we could spend, I think in 2019 they budgeted to spend 400,000. Luckily, they didn't get anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
Because
I remember those conversations.
We would have eroded these reserves. And what it would mean is we don't have projects. So there's always the debate, and as an accountant, I do apologise for being a little bit prudent, but we accountants always want your reserves to be at least retained and have sufficient money to do future development versus just saying, well, it's a big pot of money, and then when it's gone, it's gone. You're actually because it means then that all you're doing is the operational expenditure, and you're not doing anything else. And it's a debate that's I think took place this last year and will continue taking place in future years.
I think the other point to make as well is an awful lot of our reserves are invested, and we do get money. They're not sat there idle. We get a significant amount of money as a council from investments, which is revenue money to fund services. So it's that balance, as I think it was Mike that said. Do we have a reserves policy?
We do. It was
Okay.
approved in 2020.
Okay, so maybe if we're going to go through all of these reserves in September, we can look to review the policy at the same time.
Very much so.
Because there's at least, I think it'd be handy if we went through all of these and clarified what they are, because at least, well, there's one on there certainly that I know of that probably should be a restricted reserve. And then there's a difference between restricted for revenue purposes and restricted for capital, isn't there? I mean, the Swain Close one is capital only, and probably the nunnery one as well, I think, has always been capital. We can have a bit more of a reserves discussion at a later date.
Yeah, sorry for that. But
I've got it noted, David, that you want to spend all the reserve. Cards, Mark, no, don't.
Just, sorry, another thing on reserves. So there are some reserves, like you mentioned the election one, for instance. So that's always going to happen. So we can't ever spend that, I'm guessing. So there must be other ones like that. And just for my simple brain, it would make a lot of sense if there was a pile at the top that says can't be spent, and then other ones that may be spent, and then other ones that. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because, yeah.
There are some that are being cautious,
Yes.
and it's good to have, property repairs, for example.
Yeah.
And there are others that we absolutely have to have, which is the election one, and some that, you know, are earmarked for a very specific purpose, you know, and particularly grants, when they're given to us for a specific purpose, they'll appear in reserves, but they're ring fenced and you can only spend them. So that will all become clearer over time.
If I could, you just take the elections as an example.
I hope so, because don't forget, I've been on finance since
the last year. So
Just
what's the last big question?
So I have answered some questions.
but just to take the elections, we were given a figure just before the budget setting process that these elections, that they were all contested, was going to cost Thetford Council £25,000. So we've actually set aside money to ensure that there's £25,000 to pay for this year's bill, and we then have to start setting aside money for the next 4 years. When, if the elections are contested, we're going to spend probably £30,000, and that's really what, you know, that's again part of the reserve of just spending up the cost over a realistic period.
Historically, district councils paid for parish council election costs, and the government changed the law probably 10 years ago, I think, and gave districts the power to bill parishes for their share of election costs. And in most of Breckland, it doesn't really matter because people are elected unopposed. But in Thetford, where we have elections, it is, you know, it's an expense that falls on the town council now.
So anybody, if there's an uncontested one, there's no cost to that.
So cost.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Close to it.
Save us a few pennies then.
Sorry, Stuart, you're
I think the other thing to mention on the election close, it's small, but it does catch us out if we do have to have by-elections
Yes.
in the midterm. I know we did have a couple, you know, during our thing, and suddenly you talk about a few £1,000 a time, which
Yeah.
your reserve there isn't going to be sufficient.
So make sure you stay healthy.
So if it's a town by election, say the council, the county elections, are they still, the Thetford still have to pay?
The cost is split.
Right.
So the town elections occurring the same time as the Breckland elections are nice and, well, cheaper for us. If it's a standalone by-election, it's more expensive. Whereas if it, you know, it's the same time as a county election or a general election, the cost is split proportionally. Any other points on reserves? No. So at the moment, just note that list of reserves, and we'll have a more detailed discussion in September along with the reserves policy. Oh, okay. What have we got here? To receive and review the schedule of reserves for the year ended 31st of March, decision required to recommend the schedule of reserves to full council. Is somebody happy to propose that, please? Chris? Yep. Somebody second? Mac? Got those, Karen? Yep. Everyone happy? Cool. Static. That's a first. Right, we'll move on to 30/23, which is the approval of the annual governance statement. To review the annual governance statement based on the internal control review undertaken in March 2023.
Essentially, we fill in a set of annual accounts, which are called the annual general accountability return, and it's a very simplified form of accounting. And one of the schedules that it's made up of two parts, and then an auditor certificate. One of the parts is that we have to sign an annual governance statement, or the council have to approve an annual governance statement. And basically what we've done is to say, well, how do we provide the assurance to the council to be able to do that? So we've done, we did a lot of work last year. We set up a template where we looked at every single assertion that's included in this annual general governance statement. And we then looked at what do we actually do as a council. So we looked at what the council does. We looked at what the responsible finance officer, which is the town clerk, does. We looked at what the internal audit does. We went through each of these assertions and we were able to work out to say, well, if you look at the internal control review, which is attached to your paperwork, you'll be able to see how do we provide the council the assurance that you can look at these assertions and do that. And then what happens is you'll see that, it's for each assertion, we've broken it down into various responsibilities. We've explained what that assertion is, and then we've looked at what are the key elements of that, and what is counted, what the responsible finance officer do, what does internal audit do. And we've gone through all the assertions, and we've actually come to, if all these things are undertaken, the council can have the confidence that you can actually sign off the annual governance statement. Then what happens at the end of each year, in terms of the regulations, we just have a meeting. Typically, it's members of the finance committee just meet and they interrogate the responsible finance officer, the town clerk. I'm there to support the town clerk, and they just get the assurance that everything that's in this particular template is actually undertaken. And that review was held on the 29th of March. I included the minutes in the documentation, and those minutes were approved by the two members of the review team, which are members of the finance committee at that particular point in time. This document has to be approved by council, so we've just asked, put it on the agenda so that it can be recommended to council. My timing, I thought I was quite good at the timing, but unfortunately, I was supposed to also table the internal audit report, and we had some meeting schedules with the internal auditors to get back our internal audit feedback, and those meetings had to be postponed because people were out the office. So I'm hoping that we're going to have our meeting on either Thursday or Friday, and I will then, when we table this particular item, I will also just mention what the internal auditor has found, because if the internal auditor says your governance is not very good, it would be very inappropriate of me to, for example, ask you to approve a statement which says your governance is very good. So then we'll just change the statement at full council for any assertions, for anything that the internal auditor brings up.
Everybody happy with that? I appreciate it's a lot to take it. The first meeting after mayor making of finance is very similar agenda items, and it's all in one go because it's all annual governance type arrangements and accounts. But I mean, I'll say I used to be chair of finance many years ago and signed these things. And I think since you've been here, Alan, there's been all sorts of changes and new systems put in place. So I'm quite, and you've probably seen this, Mac, and you guys on finance committee. I did read your minutes, even though I wasn't there. And I've seen the work that Alan's been doing behind the scenes, and it's very positive. So.
Yeah. Are we allowed to come and talk to you? What's this the time or?
So this is a finance committee meeting.
Oh, sorry.
Full council. So there's no public questions on the finance committee agenda, but there is on full council next Tuesday. Yeah, so full council is next Tuesday at 7. You'll be very well. The first 15 minutes is public questions. On the finance committee, there's not a section for public questions, I'm afraid.
No, I'm happy.
No worries.
Okay, thank you.
See you later.
Good evening. Sorry for my lateness.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, where was I?
Question person who could thought that.
Yeah. Cool. So everybody happy that we recommend approval of the annual government statement to full council? Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Can I have a proposer? Mike, and a seconder? Stuart? Buzzword bingo. Cool. So that's that one dealt with. Mike proposed and Stuart Wright seconded.
And on all committees.
Let him. But good for checking, Karen. Make sure he's not here and he shouldn't be. Right, so the next two items are two that I requested, and it goes back to David's. Oh, sorry. Have I ticked off the wrong one? Yes, I have. Sorry. Approval of annual accounting statement. Did you miss that one? I got so excited.
Kathy does that.
Yes.
The other form that council are required to sign, as the chairman of the meeting, is really what we call the accounting standard, the accounting statement. And this is just prepared from the accounting records. The 2002 column is exactly what was in the last year's one, and the 2003 column, I'll reduce this a little bit so it can actually be seen in totality, is the figures for this year. We have to do a couple of tests, so we have to reconcile the box 7 to box 8. That's all been done. That's all in accordance with the accounting records. And this year we have to provide all the bank reconciliations to the external auditors, and that's all been done. All the bank accounts agree and are in agreement with this particular figure. So you can't be held responsible for this. This is the responsible finance officer actually signs this, and the chairman of the meeting just signs that it was actually tabled at that particular meeting.
Can we have a list of the fixed assets at some time, or is that
I can
that somewhere?
I can email that to you.
It would be interesting to know what the assets are.
Yeah. It's not conventional accounting, so they're not revalued assets. What happened is that in 2016, 2015, they actually got someone to list all the assets. They got all the property. So some of the land and buildings are listed at £1, but they're still listed in the particular schedule. And what we've done is we've just added additions to it.
Honestly, I'm sorry, I'd like.
Would you like the whole committee to have it, or just?
I think it'd be useful for the committee.
Yeah, I just like. Sorry, I like.
No, that's fine. One of the things I suggested, I spoke to Terry recently because he's now chair of venues and markets, is we're going to ask for the staff to arrange a tour of buildings and land that we own. Because certainly talking to Dave Hodgkinson, who was a previous councillor, he was still finding out 2, 3, 4 years into his term that the town council owns certain things.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not what I would like to happen. I want you all to have as much information as you need to do your job. So that will be coming through venues and markets, and
That's a good idea, yeah. And then you'd like that, wouldn't you?
I still find things out, and Stuart probably does. Like, oh, we own that, do we? Okay. So yeah, that'd be very useful, and we can maybe that list as part of that tour will be. You probably don't want to look at everything, so room cupboard or something.
Bus station toilets.
Yeah, not unless you have to. Cool. So any questions on the annual accounting statement? No. Similar to the one before, we need a proposer and seconder for that to go to full council. Is somebody happy to propose? Chris Harvey, and somebody second. Stuart Terry, thank you very much. Right, that's them dealt with. And that will go to full council, so it'll be the mayor that signs as chair of full council. Yeah, good, got out that one. So the next two are ones that I requested. Going back to David's point about vast majority of the committee being new. The budget that we're working to this financial year, the majority of you haven't been involved in pulling it together. So I've asked Alan to talk us through the operational budget and also the projects budget, and it's a chance for you guys to ask questions and get a few things clarified. And then obviously linked to that, the staff structure. So should we start with the operational budget?
What you'll see is, in terms of the operational budget, it's very structured very similar to the year-end report that we actually tabled earlier on in one of the items. What we've done again, we've kept it at the committee level. So in the document that got circulated to you, if you look at personnel, there's a tab in the file that got sent to you, and personnel, it's all the income that gets recognised in personnel and all the expenditure that gets recognised. Now, how we structured is that most of the overhead costs are sitting in personnel. So all the salaries for all the staff, contracts for equipment maintenance, admin expenses, councillor costs, they all sit in that particular department, and you'll actually see that it substantially accounts in terms of the expenditure side for 783,000, and next year it will count for 962,000. And the reason for the significant jump is the salary settlements hadn't come out when we actually did the budget. So we had no idea of what to expect for that. So we've done a very detailed budget using the staff establishment and then grossing that up to what we think it will be. And the second one is relating to the utility contracts. As a council, we signed 3-year contracts that expire in 30th of September 2023. And at the time that we were doing this, I phoned around to some of the people that always contact us and organise our contracts. And we were talking 3 to 4-fold increases in those particular costs. Heating oil had gone up by that stage. And one of the disadvantages we have is because we prepared the budget relatively early compared to the commencement of the financial year, we had to use those figures based on what was happening. Now, utility prices have come down significantly. There was a report today, for example, you know, we were talking about the price cap that comes into effect on 1st of July, and it's going to be substantially lower than it was in December. So this budget is affected significantly, the personnel budget, sorry, is affected significantly by that. In terms of venues and communication, that is a trading budget, so it's all the higher income, it's all the bar fees, the Guildhall catering, and there's certain other event costs. For example, they host the Christmas party, and that would then come into that income. So that's mainly the income-driven budget of the council. This is all self-generated income, and that sits in the VNC, and the costs associated with that are sitting at the bottom there. You'll see the expenditure side. VNC expenditure is about 56,000, income's 139,500. So you can imagine when COVID struck, it had quite a significant impact on us because that's quite a substantial part of our income. If you look back over the years, go back to 2019, 2020 or 2020, 21, you can see how the VNC income just collapsed. If you look at the yellow columns, the 2019-20, we had income of 118,000. In 2020-21, we had income of 90. Again, it's taken us a lot of time to recover from that. Our amenities budget, as we spoke about earlier on, the income around that, it's all around RPA, I would say not all of it, about 98% of it, and we get certain higher income. So, for example, you'll see Larry Gray's fun fair is on the green. He will pay a fee for having that, and other people might use our open space and will pay a fee. Very little money is generated because if it's a charitable organisation, they actually make a donation, and I don't think they read that part of our policy very, very clearly because I don't think we've received a donation for quite a while. The heritage, the amenities expenditure is all around open spaces, as the chairman said earlier on. It's maintaining our trees, it's maintaining our play parks, our public toilets, and all the open space that we have around the town. We use an outsourced contract at the moment for the toilets and for the open space. So a lot of that money is paid out in cash. The cemetery has income of 48,185. Our cemetery has limited capacity. So 2 years ago, we actually used up, I think it was by the end of January, all the spaces that we had were used up. So we couldn't accept any more interments. This last year, the income has stayed relatively constant. Bearing in mind that we used to charge people for grave digging. We don't do that anymore. So the grave digging, that income has fallen away, but so has the expense. So again, our income has stayed relatively stable at about £49,000. We've been underspending possibly in our cemeteries for quite a while, and you'll see that reflects there. Allotments is the smallest function that we have. We have quite a few hundred allotments. We charge about £50 for a full allotment, £33 for a half allotment, and that income is also growing. One of the reasons it's growing is because we've cut our allotments in half. So if someone relinquishes a full allotment, we turn that into 2 allotments, so we get more income from that. It also helps us meet the demand because the demand has been quite significant. The biggest item in terms of our budget is once we've gone through our income and we've seen what we self-generate, the balance of the money comes from the precept. And you'll see that in 2000, in the proposed budget year, that's substantially higher. And again, it was because of our cost structures. We really believed that our utility accounts and salaries accounts were going to increase substantially. So we needed that amount of money to balance the budget. And then our other income, which you'll see there, is about 35,000, about 90% of that is actually our investment income. So we have a portfolio valued at about £950,000. And from that, we earn dividends, which gives us a return of about 8%. If you looked at what the banks were paying us a few years ago, 0.01%, it's been quite a good strategic decision, although it comes obviously with its risks because if the market goes down, we lose money. On the expenditure side, once we've looked at the personnel budget, we've got all our overheads into that particular budget. It's all functional expenditure relating to the functions that department does. So we look at our self-generated income, we look at our expenditure, deduct our self-generated income, and the balance of that is what we aim to finance from the PSET.
Just quickly on investments, while I think of it, there is a separate investment policy. We use an external person for that. And they do come quite regularly, don't they? Is there anything scheduled in the next 12 months for them to come and?
What they've actually asked us to do, we had a meeting with them in February this year, or just March. And what they've actually asked is for an investment committee that they can engage more, because they've actually been hands off since COVID.
Yeah.
They haven't been here since the COVID days. And they've asked that they would actually like to meet. And we're thinking again that it's for this committee to decide that one of the terms of reference of this committee could be an investment committee and engage with the stockbrokers on a more regular basis and give them a sense. Because we have put restrictions in, for example, where we've said we don't want shares in foreign currencies. And when they came to visit us last time, they were saying, well, that's where the boom is, so do you still want to do that? We've had restrictions against what we call unethical investments. We don't like investing in oil and gas. We don't like investing in tobacco, alcohol, and things like that. And it's just a matter of always continuously revising that if the committee believes that, but also looking at other ethical and economic factors that might boost the portfolio.
Okay, so at some point we can do all of that together at the same time.
That would be very useful.
Yeah. Cool. Questions?
Yeah, personnel has gone up by 20%. Is that 20% pay rise for staff, or have you got more staff?
It's a combination. We didn't know what to expect, so I think we budgeted 7.5% for the staff increment. It was a lot lower. Well, it depends on your staff mix, because what happens is the settlement last year was £1,924. So our staff is geared towards just the structure of our staff is that we have low bed, so the percentage increase is quite high. So we just worked on about 7.5%. All the other costs basically came from utilities, and contract costs have gone up.
Yeah. Okay.
Those staff increases were imposed on us anyway, weren't they?
We belong to the National NJC. I always forget what the acronym stands for, and they're having conversations at the moment. I mean, I think most of the unions are actually balloting members to go to strike.
I don't have a problem with the percentage increase of salaries or whatever. It's just 20% seems a big increase. I think it's really well.
So it was 7.5%.
Yeah.
And we have also filled in some
But there's other
vacant places
as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think, it is a bit misleading. It's the personnel committee responsibility rather than the personnel costs.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yep, and given personnel or salaries are such a high proportion of our budget, that's why I've asked for the staff structure to be presented as well, just so we can get a handle on, where the money's going and what the roles are. Any other questions on the budget? No. How often do we get updates on how things are going throughout the year?
We try every time that the Finance and Personnel Committee meets, or anytime any committee meets, we actually give a report on their status of their budget. We try to do it as soon as possible. The first committee that meets typically is the Amenities Committee, and we really make an effort of trying to make sure that information is as complete as possible. We have certain checklists to follow, but the one thing that our bank accounts are virtually reconciled every day, and every day a creditor's invoice arrives, it is processed. We don't have any delays, and so we can produce that. So every time a committee meets, you will likely get a financial report. The earlier in the month it is, you have to add a little bit of salt to it, but later on in the month. So time this committee meets, for example, the figures for that month are finalised.
Yeah.
So this committee gets an overview of all the committee finances.
Okay, and if we wanted to amend the layout of the document, because I'm going to be a pain and ask for business rates and some staff costs to be apportioned to certain committee, because I've been nagging about that for a while. What's the best way of going about that?
I think if you maybe just had maybe a working group.
Yep.
And we just put it together using that.
Okay. Cool. Everyone happy? So our task with that one is to note, and we'll move on to 3323, which is the staff structure, which Alan circulated as a separate attachment.
So this is our staff. I'll just reduce it again. This is our staff structure as at the 19th of May 2023. So all these positions, except for one of them where the staff members on maternity leave are filled. It's the town clerk, it's the proper officer, the responsible finance officer. I am the deputy, you see on the left-hand side. I have a finance assistant who helps me with my financing, do all the financial transactions. And the committee officer is Karen, and so I'm responsible for her. Might explain why she ages so much. We've then divided into two function areas. We have the town team manager. On that side, we have a town team worker who primarily works in allotments. But what we've tried to do is get more cohesion between the team, because at some stage, the poor allotment officer, there's a backlog in clearing allotments. There was no ways that allotment officer could do all the work by himself. So then there's more of a teamwork, and every now and again, the allotment officer will help out in other areas. We have a town team supervisor. We have two general workers, one focused more on open spaces, one that works with the volunteers, so that's the one on the left-hand side. And then we have a kind of person that helps clean this particular building. So we apportion salary costs to the trust, and they also help clean the Carnegie rooms on a daily basis. On the right-hand side, we have a venues, events and marketing manager. The cemeteries and the civic function reports into that, and you'll see that there's only one civic official who acts as support to the civic function and support to the mayor. And then we have a heritage and events officer, which kind of runs some of our HLF project work and has been doing other work on behalf of the council. We have an engagement officer, which runs our website at the moment, does all our social media. We have a schools liaison officer, which is also funded by the Guildhall National Heritage Lottery Fund. And then we have three venues and events officers, basically that run the functions and are the site supervisors for the Carnegie, and then one officer that works in the Guildhall tea room. And then we have sessional and volunteer workers who we use as and when needed, just to ensure that we have sufficient capacity.
Okay, so I know the vast majority of these roles are full-time. Which ones are part-time?
Part-time is the schools liaison officer. It's 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
The engagement officer is 30 hours a week. The general housekeeping is 10 hours a week. No, it can't be 10, it's 5. It's 2 hours at 1.5 hours at the other one times 5 days. Excuse my maths.
15-ish.
It's about 15 hours. Yeah. And then the person that's on maternity leave, the venues and events officer on maternity leave, that was a 30-hour contract before she went on maternity leave.
Okay. And the finance assistant, is that full-time?
That's a full-time position.
Okay.
Well, where are they based?
All the staff members are based at the Carnegie.
Okay.
Compacted in there.
Yeah.
So I share an office with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 of us sharing one office, and downstairs I think there's about 7 of them sharing an even smaller office.
Okay, and the schools liaison officer, Heritage Lottery Fund, is that 100% funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund?
That's 100% funded, yes.
And when is that until?
My understanding is that we've got must be another year or so to go, I think.
Is it that long?
Was it
Didn't include
shorter?
that.
Yeah,
I know it was all messed up because of COVID and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I'm not sure, Chair.
Okay.
I'll clarify that.
Yeah, that'd be useful. I'll see you in a second, Chair. I'll just finish this point. Is that the only role funded by the Heritage Industry Fund, or was there another?
Part of the Heritage and Events Officer, but also funded by the.
This one. And that's a full-time role, isn't it?
That 30 hours of that is funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund and 7 hours is funded by the Town Council
Cool.
as of now.
Yeah.
When that changes, there is a change. I
Yeah.
think.
So with both of those, if you could check for me when
Sure.
they funding runs out, because obviously that's an additional cost to the council once the grant funding runs out. Terry.
I'm really pleased to see this, and it's incredibly helpful. So thank you very much for putting that together. I'm a little disappointed. I'm chair of one committee and vice chair of another. That there's been no welcome, induction, contact from the officers to, as far as I'm aware, anyway. I'm not certainly not on the two committees I'm on. There has been no contact from the officers to the councillors concerned, and I think that might be a good thing moving forward.
I think what we've tried to do, speaking very carefully, I think in terms of the committees, I've been involved in finance, allotments, and for council, and I think what we try to do, if there's what we call pre-meetings, is fundamental, and I think it really helps. It helps the chairman of the committee understand what the issues are, have a viewpoint on them, and raise certain things. And I think it's been successful. I mean, the amenities committee that I've been working with the chairman previously has been fantastic, and I think everything that we've raised, and it gives you a chance to have an input, but it also sensitizes the officer to what your requirements are. So if I
mean, I noticed on the council website, I can't find anywhere, and it may well be on there, I can't find anywhere that says which officers are responsible for what stuff. I can't find any mention of officers on there. So, you know, given that, I can't make myself known to them, so it would be nice if they came to me, I think.
Noted.
I'll make a note of that.
I think the system we had in place for amenities worked really well. And one of the benefit of setting the meeting schedule for the year is you can then work back, and so Alan will know and the team will know what day the agenda has to go out by. And Alan's very good at prompting me to say the agenda has to go out on Friday. Can we have a meeting on Thursday to finish it all off? And that's the sort of system we need to get in place with all of the committees. Because, you know, it takes time to write some of these reports, and, you know, you need a lead in time to get the information together. So the benefit of having fewer committees is there's less time servicing different meetings and making them more beneficial, which is what I wanted to try and achieve. Cool. Anyone else got any other questions about staff structure? Nope. How often, so you guys at the top in the yellow boxes refer to yourself as senior management team. How often do you meet?
We meet every Monday.
Every Monday. Cool. And 3 managers, they're responsible for supervisions and appraisals for all of the staff that report to them. Do we have a supervision and appraisal policy?
We do have a system, but it's continuously being tinkered with. And I think it needs to, again, COVID, people working from home.
Yeah.
We can all blame COVID for a lot of things, but I think it's just one of those things to also help develop bad habits in some ways. So it's up to us. We've really, you know, I think we identified the need to organise and get things back again.
Yeah, I and you know, longer serving members, I never feel like I know the staff. I don't know what their role is. I don't know if we're supporting them enough as a council, training them, developing. You know, I want to feel reassured that we are doing that. So one way we can do that is a supervision and appraisal policy and make sure we're having those regular conversations. So it may be happening and we're just not aware of it. But
I think years ago, probably personnel did better than it has been doing recently in terms of doing that. I totally agree with you. I feel after 12 years, a lot of things I don't know about the staff, and I think it could be done through this committee, but personal as it was.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
It seems to be.
Cool. Right. There's no further questions. We'll get those updates, but that's certainly useful for me because I've never seen this laid out in this way. So that's a good update. Moving on to 3423, Norfolk County Council Parish Partnership. Those of you that have been here for a while will understand the Parish Partnership Scheme. It's a Norfolk County Council fund. They put about 250k into a pot and allow parish councils to bid for very small highways projects. Very often it's pathways or speed signs or general signage. So in Thetford, we've had various flashing road signs funded, a couple of new pathways, one down Nuns Bridges near Nunnery Drive, done several years ago. There was a contribution towards the Bladen Bridge pathway on the Water Meadows. That was part of the parish partnership scheme. It tends to be small scale, so the maximum bid is normally £15,000 from each parish, and then they match it. If you were being an optimist, you would say it's Norfolk County Council funding your local priorities. If you were being a pessimist, you would say it's us as a parish funding things that counties should be doing anyway. I'm somewhere in between. But the money is there and we've, to various degrees, taken advantage of it over the years. We applied for 2 years ago to build a new pathway at Nuns Bridges. That was approved and the money sat there waiting to be allocated. I was hoping you'd have a map on there because I really don't think I can explain it very well. But on the left, you'll see Nuns Bridges Road, Mill Lane side. This is basically from the main bridge at Mill Lane going to the middle bridge. Those of you that walk along there will know that you either walk in the road or you walk on the grass. And it's been highlighted that that's obviously not ideal. And then if you get to the middle bridge and then go right, so you see Ford Place at the top there, there's currently no pathway connecting that up to the very nice Arlington Way pathway that exists around the back of the Bridge Pub. That was a town council project some years ago, not funded by Parish Partnership, I think. But it's been identified that we could formalise that pathway and make it a damn sight easier for people to navigate. We can't do all of that in one go because it's too expensive. So we've broken it down into phases. And I think phase 1A is the bridge, the pathway on the left-hand side, so connecting the two bridges up. And as part of that, we would put a new wooden footbridge in. So you can literally walk along the side of the road on the pathway, go over the wooden bridge without having to navigate the cars. Doesn't solve it on the other side, the main bridge, but it does solve that safety issue in the middle quite nicely. So 10 grand of our money matched with 5 grand from county councillors' budgets. We get 10k each to fund on local projects. Jane and I are going to put 2.5 in towards this. That gives a local contribution of 15, and Norfolk County Council have already approved their £15,000. So we just have to approve Alan paying them our £10,000 as a town council, and then they'll come out and do detailed costings and tell us that it's gone up by more than £30,000. That's what normally happens. There's me being pessimistic again. Hopefully it hasn't. We did build in quite a contingency, but yeah, that's where we're at. So we basically need to approve as a committee, and then that will go to full council, giving Alan the authorisation to spend the 10k. Does that all make sense? Mm-hmm. It's a very small intervention, but actually quite a significant benefit, I think, run from a safety point of view, but also improving access to the river corridor, and joins up that loop around Arlington Way and Nuns Bridges.
I understand the bridge.
Yep.
But only part of the path.
Yep.
Doesn't seem right. can't we just hold it over for the next year and do the path all at once?
I'm not sure if we've applied for the second stage or not.
Because someone with a wheelchair or
Yeah.
a pushchair,
Yeah.
they're going to get so far along and then the path runs out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know if we've had an update from Norfolk about where we're at with this year's, because this is all last year's parish
Yeah.
partnership. I assume they're running it again and we can in fairly quick succession apply for phase two, because it would make sense to do it all
So
together, because it'd be cheaper.
Yes, do it all at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right, David, but I do think the reverse of that is it's such a pleasure to see some action after ages and ages of non-action on this issue. The paths around Thetford should be one of our crowning glories, and they're not, to be honest. Some of them don't exist, some of them are very poor quality paths. This is a small improvement.
Yes.
We need to be working more and probably spending more money and looking for more grant money in order to do the rest faster.
Sure. We walk that quite regularly.
Every day.
But the thing is, if you're going to have a person in a pushchair or a person in a mobility scooter or whatever, you'd be able to go so far along and then turn around and go back because you can't get any further.
Yeah.
So my head is hold it over and do it all in one hit or raise the money now.
Yeah.
And do it in one, especially
not
when
sure
you're
about-
talking about you've got all your contingency monies in separate funds.
Let's, if we pay this 10K, that gives the green light for them to do the design and get the cost. Let's do that first.
Fine.
And then we'll see where we're at.
I'm just worried, David, that if you say do it, wait till you can do it all in one hit, you never get there. That's the problem. You know, I can assure you, this has been nagging in me for 10 or 12 years. We do need to make progress in small bits. Very frustrating, I agree with you, but this is better than nothing.
Earlier on, I've seen these pots of money that are in the reserves that would pay for that to be done all at once.
Can I just make a point on this?
Oh, I'm sure.
Because, so we talked about the SAM2 signs that we've got, that were purchased through this money. And 3 years, 4 years later, we still haven't got them up. And the reason we haven't got them up is because there were problems with highways where we could put it. But the answer is we buy posts and put them in ourselves. We haven't done that yet, have we? We haven't allocated that money. So if we're going to do something, let's try and finish off one of the things that we never got done and we spend money on, and the speed signs are in the cupboard.
Yeah. I'm going to
Yeah, fully with that.
So that's
going to talk to Alan about that and have an item on amenities specifically for that reason, because we either get rid of the SAM2 signs and sell them, or we put them up.
Yeah.
You know, we're not messing around, you know, they've been sat gathering dust for 3 years. So yeah, completely agree, particularly given all of the road safety issues and stuff we've been having the last few months.
Yeah.
And that would be, and many years ago, we had a road safety committee. And then that got merged into amenities, and then I don't think we've spoke much about road safety. And it's high time we did. So anyway, that's not the issue at hand. I've just made a note, David, that that's the first lot of reserves you've spent. So building a path. You'll be pleased to know that Alan's recommendation is to recommend to council that a contribution of £10,000 be made for the parish partnership at Nuns Bridges, and that is coming from the open space reserve.
Excellent.
So our initial 10K is, and we're getting a 30 grand path, and it's only costing us 10K. That would be a prudent use of our reserves, in my view.
So am I right in thinking we're only going to get half a bridge?
Don't be a fool.
Because I can see what David's saying. If you're going to get half of it, and then it's just going to stop, then how long will you have to wait till the next?
Stuart, hold on, Mike. Stuart first.
Yeah, I see how frustrating it is for people to appreciate is the certainty we've had concerning fish parks in that vicinity.
Yeah.
Little wooden bridges down there and should have been connected up years ago. Terry and I completely agreed about that. However, these fish parks have taken quite a lot of time, effort, and you can see some money towards that. Now we're getting a little bit of certainty on that. We're able to move forward. Obviously, the access path that they've put in does change a little of what we were dealing with a few years ago. And I, very much like the idea of path connectivity, and I've banged on them at their end. That should be a slope access many times. So I'm with you on the paths, but let's just get this thing going. If we get to a stage where we've got the path in and we get to the fish pass and it's got a very short section to do, then I suspect we can get it costed up and get on, do it ourselves.
Yeah, well, we own the land, so it's a lot more simpler in that particular location. Where the first bit is, we don't own the land, I don't think. So anyway, cool. Can I have a proposer and seconder to recommend the spending of the £10,000? Chris Harvey proposing and a seconder. Mac? Yeah. Everyone happy?
Yes.
Ecstatic? Hopefully we won't have the same debate next week at full council. Haven't already had it now, but you are entitled to if you want, of course. Cool. Moving on to 3523, to note and consider any correspondence received. None. 3623, committee officers update, to update on any information since the agenda was released or which requires the attention of the committee.
One thing that I would just like to start off with is just to thank the mayor for the work on getting the money out of Stanleyford. Stanleyford owed us hundreds of thousands of pounds. And the other few weeks ago, the money got transferred into a Stanleyford account that we had access to, and we were then able to settle with the town clerk. So I'd just like to thank the mayor for his efforts in that regard. We spent hours and hours, and we wrote lots of letters and did all sorts of things to do that. So if I could just have that noted,
Yeah.
I'd like to do that. Just a couple of things. One is that utility contracts are coming up for expiry. I've just been given some information. One of them came through yesterday, so that we will have to look at what we want to do from the utilities. Do we want to go short-term contracts, long-term contracts, and what the trends are? So that will be an item that will come onto the future agenda. And then just a quick update is that we're going out to renew our insurance, and we'll be doing that on a competitive basis as well for a 3-year period.
Lovely, thank you. Community engagement, 3723, to discuss and agree any consultation or media release required. Anybody got anything they want us to be telling the public at this point?
I think this is one of those things I keep talking about, where if we do end up putting money towards a path, you know, we get in ahead of that and explain the future plan so that it doesn't end up on some forum saying the path to nowhere. So, you know, we explain our future plans. And I think it's important we do that early, because otherwise we just get, you know, undone in public.
I agree. So if full council approve the recommendation about the path next Tuesday, we'll have a press release ready to go about that. So that's good news. The good news if they never build it, but you know, we're raising expectation.
The press releases.
Yeah.
I know that, you know, you need to keep quiet on it. Why can't we have press releases and everything that's done in the council go into the About Thetford magazine? It's going to be cheaper than sending out a mail shot to every single person in the town saying, this is what we're going to do. You know, if I want to know about the bridge or the path to nowhere or whatever you want to call them, I'm not going to know. If I pick up the About Thetford magazine, I will read what's in there. I can't use that. And I know you've got to keep quiet because your interests.
I'm sure someone else could answer you. I think you should. I think we should. I think a lot of councils have been frustrated by the fact that we don't, and we have the opportunity to change that at the beginning of this new council year.
Fine.
And I would support you if you wanted to push for it.
Yeah, I do, actually. I think that's important.
Okay.
Sorry, Terry. I like getting the message out about what we do, and I don't care what political persuasion it is. If we're doing something and doing it well, we should put it out there.
Nothing's ever replaced having a local newspaper, which wasn't all that good anyway. It's fine, as people informed, but it's better than nothing. I think it's an ideal opportunity to use that magazine more. It does go into every house in the town,
Yeah.
and to nearby villages as well. So local people are very important.
Make use of the community boards right on Norwich Road. You know, we could put what's happening.
Yeah, I'll bring Terry in because he was very well behaved, Stuart, and put his hand up. Terry.
As I'm chair of or one of the committees, the committee that I'm chair of, part of my remit is comms. That would be very much the sort of thing I'd be looking at, because how else are we going to get a free line to every house in Thetford? It strikes me as, I'll choose my words carefully here,
It's a no-brainer.
absurd that it doesn't already happen, Frank.
Unless we're gonna something different, I'm gonna move on because there's a deliberate reason I'm not on that committee, because obviously I have a pecuniary interest.
I was just going to say that obviously better idea, because as soon as you put it on social media, it's just, you'll get all the moaning people that are just, why are they putting a bridge there? Why are they putting a bridge there? What a waste of money. And you'll start getting, put it in pen and paper or on a book. They don't really get too much time to respond, really. And that sounds a bit,
It's in black
it
and
sounds
white.
wrong, but it sounds the way to.
Yep. Harry?
Engagement on social media is really low. It's really poor as well. So,
Only on 2 or 3 that are.
yeah.
No, you're right. That's fair point. So that came out of community engagement. So we'll pick that up next Tuesday when we have the decision or not on the pathway. Right, 3823, exclusion of press and public, to consider resolving that pursuant to the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, that the press and public be excluded for any remaining items of business on the grounds that publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be discussed. We have a item below the line in relation to a personnel matter. Are members content, therefore, that we exclude press and public, and in our case, turn off the recording, because there's no press and public here? But members happy?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Sure.
Yep, content. So the agenda item is to consider a complaint against a staff member in accordance with phase 2 of the council's compliments, comments and complaints policy. Because it's a below the line item, the papers are not circulated in advance. Alan has some packs for you. There's quite a lot of information, so I'm quite happy for you to spend 10 minutes reading that information before we have a discussion. Is that right? That's it. My best to help. It's to keep one for the state. Yeah. Bring out that. No. Standing orders, things like that. I've got the program. Yeah. So, yeah. In terms of reference. And you send it off.
Separation of roles. So if the officers are doing something, you need to know what you're doing in terms of efforts.
Yeah.
You know, it's a framework for us, and it's a framework for you.
Yeah. They call it a scheme of dedications at Mason. That's really annoying.
Well, we don't have any communications. I mean, I'm going to do this.
Do it in any moments, that's the policy.
You know,